We've been doing this little series on journeys in the Bible, and we've so far looked at Abram, and we've considered the fact that in Abram's journey we saw the need for him to lean in and listen to God, to trust God, and to obey. In the Moses story, we looked at the way in which it's good to stop and to reflect, to remember what God has done, because that will support us as we go on in life, but also the importance of sharing that story with others. And then just the other week, we were looking at Jonah, and we were reminded of the fact that as we travel through our journey of faith, we will at times go in the wrong direction. And so we need to be thankful that we have got a generous and gracious God who is willing to forgive. And also we have recognized the need for us to do two things. One is to put our hands up and admit that we get it wrong. And the second is to renew our commitment to serving the Lord. So that's where we've been as we've looked at those journeys. And today we're looking at this little story in Nehemiah. And there are three things that I want us to think about as we think about his journey around the walls. And that is the challenge to slow down. The second thing is the challenge to be quietly thoughtful. And finally, the challenge to be a people of resilient faith. So, the challenge to slow down. I don't know about you, but life seems fast. It's amazing how quickly the days just pass by and I find myself back here on a Sunday. Where do the days go? Everybody's in a rush. There's people to meet, there's things to do, there's urgent emails to respond to. There's rushed conversations that we grab either on the phone as we go or at home. There's children to pick up and drop off in different places, and they all seem to have the same starting times. And so we try to do that and not go over the speed limit. As for meals, well, hey, sometimes we just have to microwave something or drive through at McDonald's. And the reality is that we've become skilled, perhaps, at multitasking, spinning different plates, juggling different balls. It's always go, 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 hurry, hurry, hurry. And the reality is that we know that in that world, errors are made. You thought you were ordering 5 bananas from Tesco's, and apparently it was £5. Who would have thought? But I was in a rush. I'm sure that we can make banana loaf, dear. We can end up being so busy that there's misunderstandings arrive because we're not hearing each other. We're not communicating effectively. But ultimately, all that rush creates stress, anxiety, and personal chaos. Living at a fast pace constantly is not good for us at any level, personally or as a community. And one of the things that's interesting is that in Nehemiah we see this challenge to slow down. If we'd read the opening chapter, we would have come across Nehemiah being greatly moved by what his brother told him about the situation in Jerusalem. We would have encountered the state of deep grief and pain that Nehemiah had as he thought about what was going back in Jerusalem. In fact, he was so disturbed and challenged by it that when he was going about his job as the king's cupbearer, the king looked and went, "What's wrong with your face?" Nehemiah was obviously somebody who wore his emotions on his sleeve. It was obvious. And so the king and Nehemiah have a conversation, and Nehemiah asks for permission to go. And so he heads off on this journey, about 900 miles, probably about 3 months of traveling. And you can almost sense in which Nehemiah would have been desperate to get to Jerusalem. He wanted to get on with the task that he'd been given him by God to go and to rebuild these walls. And so you would imagine as he arrived closer to Jerusalem and he saw that on the horizon and he grieved more for the city that was broken and destroyed, how he would have turned up and he would have been going, right lads, let's get the tools. You've on the bricks, you've on the mortar, let's crack on. Yet that is not what we find. We don't find Nehemiah turning up at the city and immediately getting on with the job. We discover Nehemiah taking 3 days to eventually get there. Verse 11 to 12, I went to Jerusalem, and after staying there 3 days, what was he doing for those 3 days? Recovering from the journey. I'm guessing perhaps he made contact with a few people because he seemed to have some people that joined him with the journey around the walls. Praying. Lord, I'm here and I thank you for that, but I'm looking at this job and I'm thinking I don't even know where to begin. He slowed down. And that's an interesting challenge for all of us. First of all, although Nehemiah was deeply emotionally engaged and he really felt, he didn't necessarily allow his emotions to drive his behaviors and actions. He slowed down. He stopped. He took time out. And I would sense that he spent that time, yes, resting and recovering from the journey, but also praying. Seeking God out. Slowing it down. I wonder if we have ever been in a situation where we've emotionally responded. You know, something has happened in our lives and we've gone off the deep end. Imagine if we just slowed down. Imagine if we just said, breathe. Stop. I wonder if today there are some of us here who maybe need to just find a way of finding places of silence and stillness. Because actually in those places of silence and stillness, we may be able to find a better way forward. I'm thinking about the circular conversations that we sometimes have, or maybe it's just my wife and I. You know, those ones where you find yourself going around and around and around and around and never really coming to any conclusion. Some people might call it an argument, but I would just call it a discussion. And actually, you know, what is the point of those circular conversations? Imagine if you just stopped and allowed yourself space and allowed yourself time to pray through this. Maybe slowing down and not feeling that it's got to be resolved there and then might help. Imagine if you're making a decision about work and you just can slow down. Imagine if you said to your boss, look, I just need 5 minutes just to process this. What's the worst they can say? Not sure. Slowing down. But slowing down gives space for God. The second thing is that Nehemiah teaches us about the importance of being quietly thoughtful. Quiet thoughtfulness. Some of you may have seen the TV program Secret Millionaire. Basically, it's a program about somebody who is super rich, basically getting rid of their lifestyle for a week or two. They go and live in a community. It's often a community of deprivation and of social need. And the story is that they go and say, we're doing part of doing a documentary into a particular thing. And as a result of that, they get to meet local charities and local individuals, and you get to hear about the work that is going on in that area. And then at the last minute, the secret millionaire announces, well, actually, I'm not just here for a documentary. I'm here as a secret millionaire. And they get their checkbook out. And they'll write a check and they'll give it to a charity or an individual who's particularly been working in that area. Going quietly. But also what's interesting is when they go quietly into these situations, you can see the way in which these people are thinking about the community that they are for those 2 weeks living in. Quiet and thoughtful. That's Nehemiah. We're told in verse 12, I had not told anyone what my God had put in my heart to do for Jerusalem. There were no mounts with me except the one I was riding on. Nehemiah did not turn up in Jerusalem and go, a la Cristiano Ronaldo. Yep, I'm back. Hello, look at me. Nehemiah didn't do that. Nehemiah didn't walk into Jerusalem going, yes, I'm here. God has sent me. I am going to rebuild the walls. Boom, 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 boom. There was none of that. We're told that Nehemiah goes slowly, but he also goes quietly. There's no big cavalcade. We're told there's only one horse. He didn't want people to be thinking, what's going on? What are they doing? He was trying to do it under cover. He went out at night to sort of get an idea of what the job was that lay ahead. And as he travels around the walls, there's that sense in which Nehemiah is thinking. He's looking. He's trying to make sense of what is there. What really are the conditions of the walls? And you get this picture of it being pretty grim, because there comes a point where he has to get off his horse to make progress. Quiet thoughtfulness. Not big, great, bold statements. Just going about the business quietly and thoughtfully. I wonder if we need to be people who go about things quietly and thoughtfully. What would quiet thoughtfulness do if we had that approach with regards to the Church of Scotland? Our denomination. The reality is that it can feel sometimes that the Church of Scotland is a bit like the city of Jerusalem. It's a bit broken. And as we all know, we're talking about reduced income, smaller congregations, fewer full-time staff, etc. And again, the emotions well up, and again, the emotions can drive how we respond and react to that story. But maybe some quiet thoughtfulness as we survey, as we try and make sense of what the work is that we need to be doing. Or think about our relationships with other people. Imagine if we stopped shouting and we just did some quiet thoughtfulness with people. Or in our own lives, when we're making decisions, are we people who make big, bold statements? I'm going to. Do we talk too much? Or do we need to find a way to just quietly think, what might God be saying? How might I plan this out? One of the things we need to realize is this quiet, thoughtful period is not a wasted time. It's the best use of time. Nehemiah was quietly and thoughtfully going about just putting the plan together. Because he is then able to share what he was sent to do. And that leads us to the final thing, that we need to be resilient. You know, when God gives us a job to do, we need to be resilient in doing it. The fact of the matter is that resilience is a big subject in our society. For school children, we are constantly thinking about well-being and resilience. In the workplace, it's a big thing for workplace chaplains. We are often involved in conversations with people about building resilience in their workplaces, within their staff, and also within our communities. When I was at Tullochnet, there was that sense in which it was about building a resilient community. Communities that can bounce back from adversity. So we need to think about what it means to be a people of resilient faith. Because, you know, we're going to have to bounce back. Because, as we all know this, being a person of faith does not guarantee that life is going to be easy. Resilient faith is a quality of faith that enables us to see us through trouble. Helps us through temptation, helps us through trials, helps us to get through it stronger. You know, there's going to be times when things happen and we think, where are you, God? There's going to be times when we are mocked and laughed at, as was Nehemiah. Nehemiah, we're told, was laughed and mocked at and ridiculed by Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem. What are you doing? Are you rebelling against the king? They're making fun of him. It would have been really easy, perhaps, for Nehemiah to have thought, oh, Jings, who am I kidding? Can I really do that? The walls? Maybe these guys are right. Maybe actually, who am I kidding? Yeah, this is a silly idea. He could have been easily discouraged. But actually, Nehemiah had a resilient faith. And it wasn't because he was some sort of extraordinary person. It was because he had two things. First of all, he was confident in God. He says this, the God of heaven will give us success. He wasn't confident in himself. He wasn't confident in the people. He wasn't confident in their skill as builders. He was simply confident that God was going to make this happen, that the God who sent him, the God who started it, would complete it. Nehemiah wasn't self-confident. He was God-confident. And so that allowed him to endure through difficult times. Not easy, but he knew who he trusted. He knew also that he was called to be a servant. And he was confident in that. He says, we, his servants, will start rebuilding. He knew who he was in his relationship with God. And so actually, for resilient faith, we need to know who God is, and we need to know who we are when it comes to our relationship with God. Because in the hard times, it's those two things that will give us a resilient faith. So today, I want us to just think about these things. Slow down. Maybe God's saying to you, slow down. Maybe God is saying to you today, be quietly thoughtful. Don't think you've got to make big pronouncements. Take your time. Think it through. Maybe today, God is saying to you, yeah, life is hard just now. But be resilient in your faith. Trust me. And know that you are my servant. Amen.